What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's the Game Week 26 preview. So I'm going to talk about assistant manager, captaincy this week, captaincy in Game Week 29, how that might affect your transfers, selling Cole Palmer, midfield punts, and a little bit more as well. So if you enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button. Let's get into it. So there are a ton of questions that came in about assistant manager, so I've got to start there. Would you rather keep the assistant manager chip on slot and gain an extra transfer, or focus on maximising the chip going with the likes of Arteta? And I'll try and cover all the other stuff that came in as well. I think for Game Week 26 specifically, the best use of a transfer is probably to switch your manager, because for the most part, it's easier to figure out which team is going to do well than which individual player. So take Arsenal as an example. If you move to Arteta, I'd be pretty confident of an Arsenal win. And it doesn't matter how that happens, you're still going to get the points for Arteta. Whereas if you bring in like a Trossard or a Nwaneri, they probably will do quite well, but you'll be a little bit less confident on that than just Arsenal winning overall. So for Game Week 26 specifically, I think you get the most points by switching manager on average. But if you bring in a player over the next 2, 3, 4 game weeks, they might get you 8, 15, 20 points. So long term, that transfer might be better used. So it's quite a close call, I would say. Basically, if you've got a spare transfer, I would move manager. I really think it's worth it, off Unai Emery or off Slot, because Villa have got Chelsea at home, Slot has got Man City away. Both of those games have the chance of just being a draw or a loss, and there's no table bonus on offer either. And I know what people will say, Liverpool can absolutely beat Man City. I get that, but it's a potential banana skin when it's away from home. So I think if you've got the spare transfer, you definitely switch. If it's for a hit, I'm a little bit less confident, because if you move to Arteta and he just gets like a 1 or 2-0 win, that's worth 8, 10 points. The hit will probably pay off. But if they get a draw, you're probably down on points. So it's a little bit trickier. Right now, and I might change my mind by deadline, I'm telling myself that if I use a free transfer, I'd rather almost play safe probably and go for like an Arteta. But if I'm going to take a hit, I almost want to go for that table bonus for a better shot at the big score. That's kind of where I'm at right now. If you want to use a free transfer and go on a table bonus manager, absolutely fine. So overall, I think if you can, it's probably worth switching manager, unless you think that Liverpool are definitely beating Man City, in which case you might as well save it. Because even if you don't use that free transfer this week, it could come in useful later on. Bearing in mind, if you're not using a chip in 29, transfers are going to be pretty precious at the moment. In terms of which managers to switch to, I picked up this graphic from Rob T FPL on Twitter. Make sure you're following him if you're not already. This is the projected assistant manager the projected assistant manager points based on betting odds. At the top, it is Arteta 8.5, and that is because the bookies are very confident that Arsenal will win. As I mentioned already this week, the defence is so good that they don't need to score many goals to win. So he's projected 8.5. Then you've got Glasner and Ruud van Nistelrooy at 8 points. And that is obviously because there's table bonus on offer there. So if they can get the win, it's huge. But even if they just get a draw, that's pretty good. So you can read this however you want, right? Arteta is the favourite, so he's probably the safest pick. But when Glasner and Van Nistelrooy are so close, and they've got that potential table bonus on offer, it might just be worth taking the risk. And in that case, I might be able to talk myself into taking a hit. Just keep in mind that Glasner and Crystal Palace will only have table bonus if Villa don't beat Liverpool. So we mentioned that earlier this week. McKenna for Ipswich against Spurs is 7.8. Then it's Hertzler against Southampton, 7.1. Iraola against Wolves is 7. That's why I was saying the other day I would definitely go Arsenal over Bournemouth. I think Bournemouth are playing very well. The stats have been good all season, but I just think the win against West Ham for Arsenal just looks a little bit better. And the bookies agree, and they probably know much more than I do. So I think that's all I can say, really. I think for Game Week 26 specifically, it's definitely going to be worth moving manager. It's just whether or not that player you can get instead is worth more points long term, and that probably depends on who you're switching. For me right now, I'm tempted to take a hit because I want to switch one of my players, which I'll talk about tomorrow, and then I'll probably go for table bonus. I'll wait and see what happens tonight in the Liverpool-Villa game, and I might just go for Glasner. There's a little part of me tempted to go for Ruud van Nistelrooy. I just think it's one of those situations where if you back Leicester, even if they're at home against a defence like Brentford, which isn't great, and it goes wrong, it'll feel really bad. There won't be any, I got a bit unlucky. It'll be, I backed Leicester, of course it went wrong. So I'm not quite sure about it. I'd rather back a team like Crystal Palace, but they're away from home and Fulham are pretty strong. So there is risk there. But if they get a win, it is massive points. And I kind of want to go for table bonus at least once this season. So I don't know if I've covered everything. I definitely move Unai Emery, by the way. Same thing with Slot, preferably with a free transfer. Even not, I take a hit. I've probably missed something else that someone wants to ask. I'll try and cover more stuff on final thoughts, but I think overall that should hopefully help. Let's talk about Game Week 26 captaincy next. I know a lot of people are still along the lines of you just always captain Salah, but if you're ever going to go against him, this is probably one of those weeks to do it when he's playing Man City away. Although, as we know, that fixture is not as difficult as it once was. And you can see that in the numbers. They conceded 1.35 XG per 90. For them, that's pretty rubbish. Usually under Pep Guardiola, they concede less than 1 XG per 90. So Liverpool will get chances. If that happens, they're probably falling to Mo Salah. He's very likely to walk away with something. And if you want to go for him for consistency because he's the safe pick because Man City aren't that good, then absolutely you should do that. He's currently got the captain's armband for my team, but I am looking for reasons to go against him. My general thinking is, will he get something against Man City? Probably. Is it going to be that 15, 20 point haul? I'm not so sure. And so the punishment, I'm hoping if it goes wrong, is not going to be massive. Like I think like 6, 7, 8 times out of 10 against Man City away, I don't get heavily punished by going against Salah, but I'm still not sure I want to do it. So I'll talk about my own team tomorrow. Salah is still obviously a good option. Cole Palmer, as you might expect, had a great season, but stats-wise not so good as Salah, but who is really? And also with him, I'm not convinced, even with the defensive injuries, that Aston Villa away is that much easier than Man City away based on what we've seen so far. So from a points expectation, I'm not sure Palmer is really that far ahead of Salah this week at all. So you could go for him as a differential, but if I'm thinking who gets the most points, it's probably quite close. Isak I quite like because he's at home, and I think Newcastle are strong. Even though he's playing a pretty decent defence in Forest, probably top 5 so far this year, I still like Newcastle at home. I think Isak's minutes are pretty good right now. Callum Wilson is back. I think he got minutes in the last game, but wasn't that much. And I think Isak stayed on as well. So yeah, Isak played 89 minutes. Callum Wilson played 17, so they actually played together for a little while. I don't think we should expect Callum Wilson to take too many minutes off Isak right now, so I would expect another 85 plus minutes. And although Forest defence is good, they conceded twice to Fulham recently, twice to Southampton, conceded 5 goals to Bournemouth, which I do think was a bit of an anomaly. I don't expect them to get smashed like that every week, but there are a few goals creeping in. I think Isak's fine against Forest at home. I also really like Mbeumo because of the fixture. But when I look at his individual stats outside of penalties, not quite as good as most other players on this list. So you're really backing the fact that he's playing Leicester away. But I also think that's fine. Like Leicester are bottom 3 defence this year. And Mbeumo has done really well against newly promoted sides away from home already recently against Southampton. I'm not saying he'll get those same points again. But basically, right, long and the short of it is, I think Salah, Isak and Mbeumo and Palmer, to be honest with you, all get something. And so that's why I was saying earlier, I can't see the punishment being massive. And I know this is going to get clipped up once Salah gets like a hat-trick against Man City. But I feel like all those players are capable of getting something this week based on their fixture, their individual stats, etc. So I feel like it is quite a good week to back against him. And then you've got Haaland against Liverpool. I just probably wouldn't go there even if you still own him. Like his goal threat, etc. We know it's good, right? We've seen it plenty of times for Man City. I just think Liverpool defence is decent. I just think if you're going against Salah, you're probably just going against Haaland as well. And I don't mind a Bournemouth midfielder like Utara, Kluivert against Wolves at home. But I think Wolves, although their defence has been pretty poor overall this season, I think they have improved a little bit under Pereira. And I'm not sure there's enough there from Kluivert on penalties or Utara playing as that number 9 to go against some of these other players on this list. So basically, for me, I'm between Salah, Palmer, Isak and Mbeumo. I think by the deadline, I can talk myself into going outside of Salah. I'm not sure where I'll end up. Probably on Isak or in Mbeumo. But there's part of me that thinks Cole Palmer... I'm just rambling now. I think people are starting to almost underestimate Palmer a little bit. Like it's just going to take that one game for him to remind us just how good he is. There's almost part of me that wants to go for him for that reason. But Chelsea just not in a great place right now. I think I'm going to land up on Palmer, Isak or Mbeumo, but as it stands it's on Salah because let's be real, he's probably getting something this week. So for those of us that have held Luis Díaz all this time, should we be keeping him longer? The answer is probably, and the reason it's not a definite yes is because the fixture you really want him for is Southampton at home in 28. Like, don't get me wrong, City away this week and Newcastle at home in 27 are not bad, but Southampton is the plum fixture. So really, you need Diaz's minutes to still be good at that point. Now, for anyone that hasn't seen, Arne Slot has ruled Gakpo out pretty much for the Villa game tonight, which puts him at risk of a start against Man City. So almost certainly, if he's fit, Jota will play through the middle and Diaz will play on the left. And as long as that continues, Diaz is a really good option. But if Jota stays fit and he's occupying that number 9 role, and you've got obviously Nunez that can play there as well, and then Gakpo gets fit as well, then all of a sudden all of their minutes just go down. So I think if you're not in a rush to sell Diaz, absolutely worthwhile keeping hold of him. But you're probably just going to have to reassess it, I should say, on a week-by-week basis. And if all 4 of those players I've mentioned can stay fit, then for me they all then become really non-options for FPL, especially when you've also got the blank in 29. Like, I suspect that Jota is first choice number 9, Gakpo is first choice left wing, but there's enough risk there to basically avoid all of them. So if you've got Diaz, absolutely fair enough to keep him, but it's not essential by any means, because game week 28 he may not even start, or he could get subbed early, and then you've got that blank in 29 anyway. So is selling Cole Palmer in game week 29 to get Haaland a viable strategy, or would you rather just go for Marmoush instead? Now, on the Haaland versus Marmoush thing, despite the hat-trick last week, as long as they're both fully fit, I would still expect Haaland to be the better FPL pick. And whether or not you need him for 29 probably depends on your captaincy thoughts, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But I think right now, Haaland is probably the best option on paper. So I do prefer him to Marmoush, but value-wise, Marmoush looks pretty good at 7.1. With selling Palmer, I think it is viable, because the fixture in 29 is Arsenal away. That's about as tough as it gets. And obviously Palmer is capable of getting something in that game, but it's going to be difficult. So if you've got the transfers to hold on to him for Villa away, Southampton at home, Leicester at home, and then get rid of him to get Haaland, and you've still got kind of 10 or 11 players and you've saved your free hit, that is absolutely viable. Ideally, we would sell a player without a fixture instead at a similar price like Mo Salah. I think that's going to be difficult for most people to do, because there's so much value tied up in him. And if you still want him from 30 onwards, you don't want to lose all that value. So the next best player to sell is probably Palmer. So I would say for most people, that is definitely a viable strategy. I don't want to get into selling Salah instead too much right now. Maybe we'll do it when we get a few more FA Cup results. But I've already had a brief look at trying to create a wildcard team in 30 or 31 to bench boost in 33. It's quite difficult to also have Salah on that if you want Haaland as well. And the reason that you might want Erling Haaland is because the fixtures from 30 onwards are not bad, and they're probably going to double in 33. So they would have Leicester at home in 30, Man United away in 31, Palace at home in 32, and then a potential double in 33, which would be something like Everton away and Aston Villa at home. And that would also be a double where Mo Salah just has one fixture. Now, to be fair, Salah's fixtures in, let me just quickly look it up here, in 33 is Leicester away. You'd probably want him for that reason alone. But if you also want Haaland for the double and you want a bench boost, it's going to be really difficult to have Salah as well. So it might be that when you get to 29, you actually decide, I'm going to risk it and I'm going to sell Salah instead. I know everyone's screaming at the screen right now. They're not going to do that. That's absolutely fine. Sell Palmer instead. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. But I think it will become an option to sell Salah instead if you're willing to take that risk after the blank, which is a massive risk. I understand that. There's just quite a big difference in their prices. Like, Salah's up to 13.7. Palmer's only, 11.2. That extra 2 million goes far. So we'll talk about Salah a little bit closer to 29, because I don't think people are ready for that conversation yet. Selling Palmer, absolutely fine. So let's just quickly talk about Game Week 29 captaincy. I usually wouldn't do it this far out, but I think with a blank game week coming up, every transfer feels that bit more precious. And if you're not going to go for Haaland captaincy, what are the alternatives? So with Haaland, he's currently outputting 0.69 expected goals per 90. In terms of the overall league, they're still really good numbers, but they are slightly down on his previous seasons at Man City. But opponent-wise, Brighton at home, they've conceded 1.42 expected goals per 90. So I think that is a pretty good fixture. Man City will be strong favourites, and I suspect on paper Haaland will be the best captain. And so if you can get him, he probably is the one to go for. In terms of alternatives, you've got players like Ouattara and Kluivert playing Brentford at home. Another good fixture. They've conceded 1.58 expected goals per 90. They're definite options as well. And it's worth saying, I think because of people free hitting, Haaland will be the most owned captain in Game Week 29, but I don't think the numbers will be as astronomical as they have been for Salah in recent weeks, for example. So potentially because of that, you could definitely risk going against Haaland. I don't think captaining Haaland in 29 is the same as having to captain Salah in double Game Week 24 and 25. He's not that strong. So if you want to go elsewhere, that's absolutely fine. Chris Wood obviously done ridiculously well this season, playing Ipswich, 1.97 expected goals conceded for them. It is an away game, but it's still going to be a pretty decent match for Forest, and I would expect Chris Wood to get returns in that game. Cunha playing against Southampton in that week, the worst defence so far this season. He's definitely an option as well. Bruno Fernandes, again, newly promoted side, Leicester, 1.92 expected goals conceded. He's an option too, although Man United are not playing that well right now. It might not matter when they get to play Leicester. So I think if you're going against Haaland, you're either going for someone in the Brentford-Bournemouth game, probably lean more towards Bournemouth players just because they're at home, but Mbeumo is definitely an option as well, or you're just going for Wood, Cunha, Fernandes, probably the best three players from their respective teams for FPL against Southampton, Leicester and Ipswich. So if you're comfortable doing that rather than going for Haaland at Brighton at home, then there's no need to necessarily force Haaland into your team, and that might make your transfers over the next few weeks a bit easier. But for me, as someone not free hitting in 29, I'd really ideally want to get Haaland if I can. Because also, if the ownership's not going to be astronomical, that also makes him more of a differential than we've seen, obviously, in previous seasons. So that just makes me want him even more. But for someone that's not free hitting, it probably does mean selling Palmer or Salah. And if you sell Salah, that could get messy after the blank. And if you sell Palmer, you're getting rid of someone with a fixture, albeit it is Arsenal away. And most people are not in such a luxury position where they can afford to sell players that have got fixtures. So it's a bit messy all around. I kind of want Haaland, but there are definitely alternatives as well. So what do you think of Garnacho and Nkunku as punts if you already have double Bournemouth midfield? Now, I know a lot of people will write these two players off, but I actually think they're worth considering. And I'm not saying they're better than Utara, Kluivert, Semenyo, Wanyeri, Trossard, Mbeumo, etc. But if you're looking for a differential specifically, I think both of these options could be considered, at least in the short term. So let's talk about them individually. Garnacho is 5.9. He's currently putting up 0.36 expected goals per 90, 0.09 expected assists. The next four fixtures are pretty good overall. Everton away this week, followed by Ipswich at home in 27. Arsenal at home in 28 is obviously tougher. Then it's Leicester away in 29. After the blank, Forest away, Man City at home, not quite so good. So long term, I'm not sure whether you'd want Garnacho, but there is a chance Man United will double in 33. So no matter what you think of them right now, you might consider them if they double, right? And it would be Wolves at home plus Bournemouth away, so not that bad. So fixtures are okay before up till 29, possible double, maybe Garnacho at 5.9 as a differential could be an option, right? And I know people will point to the Spurs game as reason not to get him because he missed a few chances, he's quite greedy, but we like greed for FPL. We're not worried about what the team does, apart from assistant manager. We're worried about what the individual does. And I think right now, he basically has to pretty much play 80 to 90 minutes every week because Man United don't have any other options. You look at that bench against Spurs, full of young players. Ahmad's injured for the season. Rashford's on loan. Garnacho's got to play. So the minutes are good. The fixtures mostly over the next four are pretty good. I like him as a differential. Nkunku, I've got a lot of interest in because he's down to 5.7 million, which is kind of crazy compared to where he started at. There was a lot of hype around him in Game Week 1. That went like an absolute disaster, right? One of the worst picks I've probably ever made in FPL. But Chelsea also have injuries, and Nkunku's just played 90 minutes in Game Week 25. Now, I do have some scepticism about whether Nkunku will keep playing because Maresca has said he's not a number 9. And obviously, once Jackson is back, he's going to come straight back in. And I just don't know if Nkunku will continue playing. So I do worry long-term about his minutes. But if he plays another 90 minutes against Aston Villa away, then you've got back-to-back home games against Southampton and Leicester, a match in 29, albeit it's against Arsenal away, and then possibly a wild card in 30 or 31. As a short-term punt, I think he looks pretty nice, especially when you've got newly promoted sides. They're not really newly promoted anymore, but you know what I mean, in 27 and 28. But I need to see him get good minutes against Villa. I don't know if I'd be willing to take the risk this week specifically, but for 5.7 million... we know there's a great player in there. We haven't seen it for Chelsea yet. but he has scored quite a few goals this year, albeit mostly in Europe. And he's putting out, in the minutes he's played in the league so far, 0.7 expected goals per 90. There's a reason that Chelsea bought him. It hasn't quite worked so far. I'm a little bit worried that if he doesn't work in Maresca's system, rather than change the system, he'll just get Nkunku out of the team. But with the injuries they've got right now, like, he has to play. He just played 90 minutes against Brighton away. Like, he's only had 4 starts. So yeah, 4 starts so far in 536 minutes. So we've got to take the underlying numbers with a pinch of salt. But we know from previous clubs he's done well. So I think looking at the two, Garnacho is definitely the one that I'd be more confident of continuing to start, because Man United just do not have any other options. Nkunku, I'd be a little bit more worried, but I think it's very promising that he just played 90 last week. And I think before 29, he probably is the better option because he doesn't have to play against Arsenal and he gets to play Southampton, Leicester. So worth looking at, but I'd still rather go like Nwaneri, probably Trossard, Utara, Kluivert, etc. for a bit more safety. I mean, Nwaneri's minutes long term are not guaranteed either, but he's a lot cheaper at 4.5. Anyway, let me know if you're actually going to think of going for these differentials in the comments below. If you've enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button, and I'll be back for team selection tomorrow.